Hello, beautiful Jackie.
Hello, it's nice to be back on the podcast again.
I feel like we could just sit here for like 2 hours and talk without even recording the podcast, but save that for another day. I really wanted to get you on today because I know that you are also a beautiful modern day mum. You have a family and you're a psychologist. And so today's discussion is both professional and personal. And this is something that I have battled with too. And I see a lot with the mothers that are drawn to me and who I work with is mothers who are in business or leadership and they are in like the parenting space or the psychology space, the health space, people who already have an awareness around conscious parenting and reparenting and the inner work and that sort of thing. And this pull between knowing that we're trying to do it differently and we want to be present and conscious parents, but we're also ambitious and we want to achieve and be in our business or our leadership roles, and how much time we should spend with our kids, whether the time's more important or the quality, and the notion of attachment, because I see so much of it online as well. And I think that there's a misconception that secure attachment means being with your children 24/7 and meeting every need and that sort of thing. So, welcome. And also,
Mm.
let's start with that. What actually is attachment?
We're gonna. Oh, I love that we're having this conversation, and I guess I can just share off air as we jumped on and we're kind of like getting into things. I said to you, I was like, I love this because this is the conversation I desperately wanted to have, years ago when I first became a mum and in my early motherhood, and still want to have now with other mothers because I feel like what this up, and you and I are very similar people. We've connected over the years of that, but I think the people that we're talking about, the mothers that are going to be listening in here, do want all of that wonderful career success, goal fulfillment, but not at the expense of mothering. They want to be exceptional mothers alongside that too. And that's what I often hear. And for me, I was like, I want to be the best ever mum and I want all this other stuff happening at the same time. And is that possible? I don't know. So that's the way I see this conversation play out, and looking at it through a framework or a lens of attachment in supporting and growing our babies and our kids, I believe is a really, really valuable place to look at it.
So, like, you've just pretty much put it into words. So, that's why I cannot wait to have this conversation with you. So, yeah, let's start with what is secure attachment.
So when we're talking about attachment is a branch of psychology. There's decades of research that supports this. So it's not just a trendy little notion that's popped up on social media, though it is, you'll see it to your algorithm now that we're having this. If anyone is listening, it's going to get flooded. So prepare yourself. But it's been around for decades. It's got a rich history of research and science backing it in psychology science. And what we're really talking about is the bond between a caregiver and their child, basically.
Okay. And why do we need to know about this? Like, parents or ambitious women may be listening to thinking, why do I actually need to know this right now?
So attachment is essentially the root of so much of human development. Yes, for kids, but also for the lives that those kids will grow into adults to go on to have. And what I mean by that is it forms like this, our internal blueprint of the way that we understand ourselves, the way that we understand other people and ourselves in relationship with them, and the way that we even just come to understand the world around us. This is all grounded in the attachment connection, the relationship we have with our caregiver when we're young. So it matters to understand it for ourselves and why we are the way we are. And it matters to understand the kind of parents and mothers that we want to be in growing our little people up too.
Yes, and this is such a huge part of my work, in that often that's what we're looking at too when mothers are saying, I don't know why I react that way, or I don't know why I think that way, or I don't know why I feel anxious when I do this certain thing. And often we know it stems from attachment. So what are the different types of attachment?
Yeah, so when we look at the research around it, they tend to classify it in four buckets, we'll call it, or categories of attachment. And this is things that people might have heard about, these phrases thrown around, but let's just talk through them for the sake of all being on the same page. Secure attachment is very often people, see that to be what we're aiming for here. And when we talk about secure attachment between a child and their caregiver, really what it is that that child trusts their caregiver will be available to them and responsive when they're needed. So they kind of grow up in this experience of the world, thinking, yeah, people are going to be there for me. My needs are recognized, my needs are worthy, and I can have them met in relationship with other people. It's a pretty nice space to exist in, right? And it leads, generally speaking, to healthy relationships, good self-esteem, a whole lot of other factors that have been studied too, but it has some really great outcomes linked back to it. Really what we're sort of looking to achieve if we're going to be conscious about this in relationship with our kids.
And what about the other types?
And the other types we have next is what we classify as anxious or ambivalent attachment. And typically this develops in child caregiver relationships where there's a bit of inconsistency. So sometimes the parent might be available and responsive, and sometimes they're not. And the message is that they're not available. Now, when I talk about this, immediately I hear it, and I think what younger Jaquie would have heard, and that would be alarm bells, panic. Oh my gosh, that one time when I was having a tantrum and I wasn't available, have I ruined them? Absolutely not.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about all that, but let's just break down these categories for the sake of it.
Go back to good enough parenting. We can circle back to that at the end of this because that's where that ties in, right?
Thank you. Yes, let's put that on the shelf. But for now, in anxious or ambivalent attachment, the child sort of learns like, oh, I'm not sure that my caregiver is going to be available to me. And it tends to result in a clinginess or a difficulty for the child in going out and exploring because they feel like they kind of need to hold on super tight because they're not sure if the caregiver is going to be available or not. Hence the anxious attachment. The next one is what we call avoidant attachment. And for probably many factors in this dynamic, the child has learnt that expressing their needs or expressing distress when they're upset generally doesn't reliably bring support from their caregiver. So they tend to minimize their expression of that and just kind of get on with it themselves.
Yeah.
It can look like hyper independence. It can look like this child's kind of got it all together and they're just, managing everything. What we know from the research, though, is that it doesn't necessarily equate to like a lack of stress. The stress is internal because they grow up being like, other people probably aren't going to be there for me, so I'm going to take care of this by myself.
Yeah.
Which, down the track in relationship doesn't really work out so well when you're in a romantic relationship with someone.
Yes. And that's often the trend that I see with really high performing women too, who are out there trying to achieve and not wanting to rely on someone else or, present as, and the soft mother, the nurturing mother, because they probably didn't get that themselves. So all of this plays out in our adulthood, and it always makes sense when we go back and look at our attachment lens or through the attachment lens.
Yeah. And that's why I love this work, because when we make sense of ourselves and the way we are, it's like the whole world looks different. We're like, oh, of course I acted that way. And maybe now it's safe to soften. And anyway, we'll come back to that too. But just for completeness, the fourth final category is what we classify as disorganized attachment. This is problematic because the child tends to happen in relationships where the caregiver is abusive or unwell or not able to provide caregiving. Or absent a lot of the time. So the child learns that the person they need for support and care and safety is also unsafe. And it's this really tricky dynamic of like, I want them, but I can't trust them and I'm unsafe and they're scary to me. And the behavior around that looks pretty disorganized and chaotic. So that's a pretty tricky dynamic there.
Yeah. And that often stems from a household that is experiencing, complex trauma.
Absolutely. That's what the level of what we're talking about. We're not talking about one-off occasion or when parents are distracted or busy. It's like abusive relationships, domestic violence, these types of situations.
Now, so one thing I want to ask about, and, use your experience, obviously working with families, when you say to anxious attachment, so because I see a lot of children and parents who are feeling anxious feelings in this modern day world, does that necessarily mean that they have an anxious attachment style?
Not necessarily.
How would you distinguish between the two things? Because I say this because if a mother is listening to this and they are anxious a lot of the time and they're not wanting their children to have the same imprints or the same style, how do they know the difference between, oh, my child has an anxious attachment or my child is just feeling feelings of anxiety?
Yeah. Such an important question, and so important that we cover it, because
and probably nuanced as well, as in like attachment isn't something that you can just talk about in a podcast and be like, wait.
Oh, exactly. So yes, absolutely that. It is complex and it is nuanced, and there are many things that go into somebody's attachment style. I will say that first. But here's something that might make it relatable. For example, I work with lots of parents that have little ones who struggle to separate from them, right? And if you are listening to this, and I speak, this is personal and professional for me because my children are all highly sensitive. One is neurodivergent. And so we can see personality traits, temperament of the child, the way their brain is wired and their nervous system is wired, right? A child, for example, I'll just speak from personal experience, a child that is neurodivergent, that is wired and has a tendency towards overthinking, being nervous, being cautious in new situations, temperamentally that is a little more reserved, is far more likely to struggle to separate than a child that is not, okay? And that doesn't come down to attachment style. That's a lot about who they are as an individual child. So before anyone listens to this and thinks, oh my gosh, my child is clingy, my child won't separate at school or preschool, it must be something I did, because that's where mums go automatically.
That's what we all do. Yeah, exactly.
Oh, clearly it's the way I parented them and I set them up for anxious attachment. No. To understand what truly constitutes or drives an anxious attachment, we need to understand what the needs are underneath. So for all kids, there's two big universal core needs, and that is the need to explore and to have a safe space to go out and explore the world. So when they're toddlers, it looks like sitting on the mat in front of you and crawling away and checking out what toy's been left on the floor, right? As teenagers, it looks like feeling safe to go out with their friends to events or whatever, and to be able to, part B of the second need is to have a safe haven to come back to and to be held in. As a baby, that can look like someone to pick you up and scoop you up when you fall over trying to learn to walk. As a teenager, it can look like coming back and being like, hey, my girlfriend broke up with me. I'm devastated. Can we talk about that? So if those two needs are being met, that's going to most likely lead to secure attachment. And I guess what I'm trying to link that to is if you are particularly anxious, for example, that will, as a mother, right, that will have an impact or a dynamic on your child, but it's not necessarily going to set them up for anxious attachment, particularly if you're cognizant about it. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, the self-awareness piece. So many mothers that worry, I'm like, just because you are worried means you're aware and you know. And I think that from my personal experience too, I know that when I've been really hard on myself, you know, around being the most perfect regulated version, because this is something else that's online that's gross, and maybe yelling or snapping or maybe not handling a situation properly, when I beat myself up about that, that just keeps reinforcing the loop and the situation. Like the self-compassion muscle is the most important piece of all of this, I think, because if you're listening to this right now too and your heart is beating and you've got a lump in your throat, like I know that feeling too, because we care so much about our children and we want to be conscious parents. But just know that if you are aware of this and you're trying to learn about it, then you are doing a good job.
You're already ahead in the race. If you're interested and you're aware and you're reflecting on yourself and thinking, oh yeah, that for some reason doesn't sit right, I'm going to look at that, you're ahead of the game.
Yeah.
Can I jump in at this point? Because another thing I see pop up from time to time on socials that actually I think does have merit. Sometimes it gets a bit skewed.
Mm-hmm. Circle
of security is like the gold standard when it comes to attachment, because again, it's all evidence-based, it's quality research and, you know, delivered across the world. So Circle of Security, if you're interested in this, I suggest you Google them, but they had a study that supports this statistic. They say 30% is what we're looking for. 30% of being in attunement with our child is the sort of statistic that we're looking at to foster secure attachment. Now, the mums I've had conversations with find that mind-blowing. They're like, what do you mean? Like, I'm gunning for 100 or 98% here. Pick yourself up if I slip below 80. Like, this is the world we live in, that we've become conditioned
to the other way almost. Like, I think that's more damaging. Well, that's what I see. And when I work with these high-performing women, it's like they are trying to achieve 100%. And it's like, that is not possible. Like, if you think 30% is 3 out of 10 times that you are attuning to your child, meeting their needs, attuning to their emotions, and if you can start with doing that for yourself first, and that's why I predominantly work with mothers now and not the child, because if they're doing this first, then that's going to help, obviously, the child. But yeah, this perfect parenting, or that conscious parenting, means that you're doing it perfectly, or that you're responding to your child for every minute, because I know people personally and professionally that are almost going the other way, where potentially the child is feeling more anxious because the parent is actually trying to be over the top and meet every single need and not let them cry or not let them experience hardship. And I think that's huge at the moment.
Huge, absolutely huge, So anytime that we find yourself or you catch yourself mentally berating yourself or, really feeling the weight of a time when you've perceived that you haven't met your own internal standard, just check that and just be like, okay, 30% attunement, not that we're advocating for bare bones, but like the women are just, yeah, it's just not where people's heads are at.
Yeah, no. Oh, it's so huge. I think this is honestly the one of the biggest challenges of modern day parenthood. And I know personally when I had Raf, being online and like I hadn't found attachment parenting or circle of security or aware parenting or anything like that when I first had Raf. I was going from, I feel like mainstream advice where a lot of my friends had done like the sleep training, the tizzy hole stuff, the trying to make kids fit in to your schedule type thing and not attuned parenting.
Yeah.
And so now I guess, I observe that space, but then also equally in the conscious parenting space, there's still like the other end of the spectrum, just like there is with many approaches where it can just swing both ways when really what we're wanting is, or like with everything.
So healthy. Let's hang out there. But I'm not immune to it either, as someone that deeply believes and has done so much reading and professional work alongside my own mothering. So I guess for context, my kids are now 11, 9, and 6. So I'm kind of in that, next phase. I'm not immune to it. I saw a reel the other day that was this luscious family that, were homeschooling so mum could be with her 6 kids all the time. And no shade on that. If that's an option to you and that's your deliberate choice, how beautiful if that works for you. But for many people, that is just not a reality, right?
No.
For economic reasons, for personal reasons, for fulfillment, for so many factors that go into families and the way that we all make up different things. So for those of us for whom that isn't an option, regardless of the reason, we need to know that that's okay. It's more than okay.
Oh my God, I'm so glad you said that. The other day, I was speaking about this exact topic with someone around how I co-sleep, I breastfeed, and I do things my own way. But that's because I have the foundation of emotional intelligence and understand what's healthy for myself and my child. And that's the approach I try and take. So if my mental health and my needs weren't being met, and I was trying to co-sleep and breastfeed, then I would not do those things because I would be like, this is not working for me. This is not, but those things align with my values. And it's way easier, honestly, for me to co-sleep with Rome and breastfeed, and Josh sleeps with Raf at the moment, and that's just how we operate. But there comes a time too, sometimes when that doesn't work and we need to make changes. And I think that's the flexible mindset that we need to go into everything with is like, how do I meet my child's needs, but also meet mine first? Because there's no way you can meet your child's needs if you're not meeting your own first. And I think that's the nuanced discussion that needs to be had, especially with, high performing women who are listening to this. It doesn't mean it has to be so black and white, or that you have to start homeschooling and co-sleeping and breastfeeding and doing all these things a certain way, because that in itself can be dangerous if it's actually not serving you.
Yes. And so true. And here's my theory on this. I don't have research to back this up. My theory is that in the world that we exist in, where we're time poor, we have so much information at our fingertips, social media trends influencing us subliminally all the time. We've been sold this idea that there's a simple solution to complex problems, that it's going to come out of the box thing that we just plug in, and it just doing the biggest disservice. The reality is each family unit, each mother, very often at the center of that family unit, just what you said, we need to honor our own unique nuances and dynamics in the family and figure out what works for us that aligns with our values, and it's very likely that if we get that lined up, it's going to flow on for everybody's well-being, I believe.
Exactly. So if we're looking at, being attuned to our children and connecting with our children, because a lot of this is online too, around like more about how long you spend with them, or it's more about the quality and, the micro moments of connection and that sort of thing. For mothers who are ambitious and they're working, how can we create this secure attachment or this beautiful connection between mother and child?
Yeah, and this is where you see a lot of quite shouty voices sometimes online talking about it's the amount of time or, whatnot. Attachment research definitely suggests it's definitely not simply about the hours we clock. So for, if we're looking at checking in or clocking in for a certain amount of hours and feeling like, tick, that's done, it's really not where we need to be focused. What we need to be focused on is the quality of the connection that we have when we are there. So what that looks like, to get super practical with it, is remembering those two needs: safe base and secure haven, and then being there for our kids for that. So rather than, and look, this is not to say, sometimes I get those moments plonked down on the couch watching a Friday night movie next to them, right? But sometimes, well, what we should be aiming for is to be in attunement with them there. One of the most valuable concepts I took out of Circle of Security is the importance of delighting in our kids, simply like witnessing them and like taking in their magic. And I think when we get so hyper focused on like must connect, must attune, you know, how am I doing this? It's actually that simple. Like look at them and like delight in what they're showing you or whatever they're pumped about that week. You know, find a love for Minecraft, find a love for dinosaurs or whatever the thing is, and just join them in their world there. That's being seen and attuned.
Exactly. And I think the baseline for this, though, is presence and you being able to be there in that moment with your child. So it doesn't mean being with your child for an hour on the floor in intense play where you're like, because that, like you said, that's not relational. Like they can feel that. The energy there is like forcing energy, or if you're there, but you're actually thinking about other things. And I know that is something I really struggled with when I started my business, was being with my daughter when I actually really wanted to be working. And that is the discussion I think you have around, well, how can we make this work where that you are working some days and then other days you're with your child? And I think it's the internal boundaries of being like, okay, I'm with my child now, so this is where I am. I loved what you said about delighting in them. I love that from Circle of Security, because I think when we are regulated and we can be grateful, we can notice those moments a lot more. Like when we're in dysregulation, and I say this from experience of like the first 6 months postpartum, I have to work extremely fucking hard to find those moments of delight, because your capacity is stretched so thin. And if you do have a business and your partner's working and you've got other children, for me, having my second child, finding those moments, I had to intentionally work harder to find them. And that was due to my own capacity being stretched.
I think that's so fair. And I personally relate to that too. The newborn phase for me was significantly harder than, you know, when they hit toddlerhood, preschool, school year. I just get so much joy out of them now, you know, that they're my little mates. And so I think that's valid. But then, you know, one of my best friends, she's like, give me all the babies. She could happily sit on the couch and delight in them, goo and coo over them for hours. So I guess this is individual. And one thing I was going to say, when it comes to delighting in them or finding these windows of true connection and presence, something I personally may resonate with other moms, that's why I share it, found that much easier to do when I was out of the house, because there wasn't the pull of laundry screaming at me. The messy kitchen, my house was perpetually, it still is, chaotic. So when I got out, and even now I'll take the kids out one-on-one, you know, go to Yoga Berry together. My oldest loves Starbucks and a foot massage. I'm so glad we're fit. But when I'm out, I find it so much easier to be fully present with them. So that might be something to consider.
100%. And even if you're just getting out to go for a walk, like I know living rurally, that can feel really hard sometimes because I'm not near anyone. And so sometimes you do just want to be with other people or in a different environment. And sometimes just a walk can reset that. But lately, I love when my daughter wakes up in the morning and she opens the hallway door and I'm always out in the lounge room already. That is such a beautiful moment to delight in her, because she can see how excited I am for her to be up. And I just love it. Like, I love it. It brings me so much joy. And lately in the bath, we've been putting heaps of bubbles in, and I pretend that I like sneeze the bubbles onto their faces, and they just find that so funny. So like, these are the things, honestly, that make my day. Like these micro moments. And then I find myself pushing them on the swing, just looking at them and just being like, I love you so much. Like,
and that's to yourself to open up for those moments too, right? Like, and then I always think about how that must feel for the kid looking at us as the center of their world, because they don't yet have deadlines, friendships, relationships. It's just us. To look at the person that is literally a rock star to you and be like, oh, she's so in love with me. Like, I mean, could there be anything more nurturing than that?
Totally. And I also want to actually flip this and go the other side, because if you're listening to this going, oh my God, I just feel like I'm too tired and I just can't be fucked. I find myself not being able to delight in those moments because I'm just so tired. I get that. And sometimes internally, that's what I have to tell myself. It's like, I am tired right now, but what is something that I could do that doesn't really take a lot of me, that is going to be huge for them? Because I have been through a period, and I think we go through these seasons in motherhood and work and life too, where one child is really requiring a lot from you, in that you can tell that they are really trying to seek more connection. Because I know that when we've had more stressful periods or busier seasons in our house, it's that attunement from them where they're going, am I safe? Am I loved? Am I seen? Am I held by you? And so it's like, can we play dragons? Can we play dragons? Can we play dragons? And the more that I put off playing fucking dragons, the more it was just persistent. So then it's like, I know she needs this. She just wants this connection. And I know it's tiring playing dragons, but if I just play for 10 minutes and just give her that full attention for 10 minutes,
Yeah,
that's it.
it's so true.
Sometimes it feels hard.
It really does. And if you're in that place of like essentially burnout, where you're like, I can't scrape together the energy to delight in right now, I too honor that. My suggestion around that is, when you can muster an inkling of energy for it, look for something that is equally delightful for you. Because for me, role play, oh, I struggle so hard with it. Like, that is not delightful for me, you know, being the kid, and I always do it wrong. And then she's like, no, you meant to. I'm like, oh, this is so stressful. But I really love pulling all the doonas out onto the back deck and making coffee and a warm milk for her and sitting there and snuggling, whatever, laying on the trampoline, looking at the stars and letting them bounce me while I bounce on the trampoline, and something that feels somewhat nurturing for you as a mum as well in that moment. And you'll be far more likely to attune in with
Yes, 100%. That's like a bit of a hack, isn't it, right there? So let's put that on. You should put that on Insta. That's a great hack. So because I feel like what is probably coming up right now too is the feeling of mum guilt, of like, I'm not doing that, so I must be doing it wrong. What's your advice here, and what's your perspective on mum guilt? Because I think everyone also has a different view around mum guilt and guilt as an emotion. So I'm curious to know what that is for you.
My take on that, I'm really fascinated by, occasionally you'll get people that get on in public spaces and say that they don't indulge in it, right? Emma Isaacs, you know, Head of Business Chicks, who I loved her books, and I think she's amazing. That's her stance. She's like, I absolutely don't engage with that. I find that fascinating and wonderful, but it's not me. I am not immune from mum guilt. It still stirs up in me sometimes, and I have to consciously look it in the eyes and deal with it. And I suspect a lot of other mums would be in that place. So mum guilt is inherently, though, damaging for us, because like you said, any time that we sit in that place and spiral in it, it's more time that we're not aligned with ourselves and our kids and, you know, living in our purpose. So it's a skill it's a thing to be worked on, for sure. I would encourage mums to look at it, to invest in the time to work on it. Use it as a red flag for if you've been pulled out of alignment with what you want, but equally then put it in its place. If it's unnecessary or it's unfair on you, and it's something that you're carrying because it's backed by a whole lot of shoulds that don't actually align with you, call that out and do the work on it.
Yeah. This is like one of the huge conversations I see in the online space of like, you shouldn't be working, you should be a full-time stay-at-home mom, and you should do this, and you shouldn't start something because then you're going to be taking away from your children. And like, this is the work that I love doing with mothers, because I have done it myself, in that we have 2 businesses. I really don't need to have my business, but I freaking love my business and it makes me a better mum. And so that I should really just not work in my business and just work in our company and, you know, be this mum that's at home homesteading and blah, blah, blah. But for me, like, I would be a miserable mum and I would not be achieving my goal, I guess, of being a conscious parent, which is alignment with my values. Like, that's where that comes from, is my value is that I want to be the best human that I can be for me, myself, but also for my child. And so that looks like me working and doing this work because it lights me up. But if you're getting online and you're saying that you shouldn't work and you shouldn't put your kids in daycare and you shouldn't do this, I think that's where the guilt comes from. And so the audience knows the difference between guilt and shame, because shame is a cloud that often can sit above us too, if that's something that we don't dive into. Guilt is where we say that I've done something bad or that I'm not good enough. The shame piece is that I am a bad person. You know, the real deep, I'm not worthy, I am not enough. And so there's 2 distinctions there. And I think, like what you said, the guilt often stems from the shoulds, putting pressure on yourself to have it a certain way or do what someone else is doing because that's what lights them up. when really it's a nuanced conversation with yourself around what do you actually want. But it's not simple to get there. And this is why the coaching work I do with mums is getting to the root of why you can't prioritize your needs or what you want, because it often stems from your own imprints and upbringing. So I say all that because if you're looking online at someone else's life and comparing to go, well, in order to be a conscious parent or to raise securely attached kids or to do whatever, and you're looking at how someone else is doing it, you don't know what's going on for them. You don't know their history. You don't know their current circumstance. It's just so not as simple as looking at what other people are doing and then going, oh, I'm going to do that too because they have this certain thing.
Never, ever. And that's such an important thing to point out and to be aware of and to catch ourselves. Just to go back when you said about your decisions and how it aligned with you, that resonates too. And I guess just anecdotally sharing, I actually believe I'm a far better mum when I am also working, chasing goals and dreams and coming back to them fulfilled and lit up and excited, and rather than a little bit cranky and resentful and overstimulated, which would be on the flip side if I weren't. So, but equally I've worked with mums that say, no, I just love being home. And that is what lights me up. That is what fulfills me, full-time mumming in this stage of my life. That's equally valid. It's about finding whatever is your set point.
100%. I also think that women come to me to do this work. They don't lose their ambition, but they lose the proving and achieving, So this comes into the conversation around maybe you are working, because I know this is what cracked open for me when I had a child and I was an assistant principal, and I was only in that for a short time because I felt pregnant, which we were trying. But I was also really disappointed because I wanted to experience that role for 3 years. Yeah. Anyway, I wouldn't be here if that hadn't happened. So it was divine timing. But I understand, I help a lot of millennial mothers who go through this when they are high achieving and they're adventurous, they're high energy, they love doing all the things, and then they have a child and they're like, oh my God, I just need to get back to work. And this is the discovery and the curiosity period around, why can I not be present or still or slow down and just be with my child when I love them so much? It's not that you don't want to be a mom or that you don't love them, but there are often parts of you that think that you need to work to be worthy, or you need to earn money to be worthy, or all of these imprints that come up when we do have a child. And so it's an interesting thing to unpack of as you move through this, you might find that, yes, you still want to work, but maybe you don't actually want the things that you used to want because we've peeled back those layers of why you're actually trying to achieve the thing in the first place.
And I think this goes to what you were saying before, the value of doing the work with a coach, a therapist, person, however you find them. It's really hard to do this by yourself. It's a heavy lift, especially if you're parenting, possibly working. That is a heavy lift. I think that to engage with someone that does see you, that understands you and can shine darks, your blind spots back to you and raise these questions and have the conversations with you is so good. I wish every mum could have that. Every mum.
Same. Absolutely same. It absolutely changes your life. And I feel like a lot of millennial mothers are doing it because they're wanting to reparent themselves. And so they're learning all these different parts to themselves that they've never actually addressed. And so it's beautiful. I love, it's like they're go into a cocoon and come out the butterfly is this new version. And motherhood does that to you though. And no one fucking prepares you for that.
Nobody tell us. I thought I was prepared, but maybe I wouldn't have listened anyway. I would have thought I knew better.
I think they try and tell us, but I don't think we can really grasp matrescence until we're in it and coming through the other side as well. So just on that, I want to finish on this because this is definitely something that I live by. What is your view around, seeing mothers live a fulfilled life rather than doing what everyone else says, or there's one chick going around, I can't remember her name. Is it Erica? I can't remember her last name. Anyway, she was saying how we shouldn't put kids in daycare. We should never separate kids from their mothers and blah, blah, blah.
And CEO interview.
Yes. Do you remember? Yeah. And I was like, wow, okay, I don't think this is going to go down well with a lot of mothers in modern day society that have to work, especially. Yeah. So, for mothers who want to work, or maybe they're in leadership positions, their kids are in daycare, or maybe they want to start their own business and they want to have a nanny, that's my current reality. What would you say to them who, they are ambitious and they want to live this type of life? What would you say from an attachment lens?
I think you can absolutely hold your ambition and honor your ambition alongside being an exceptional mother, caregiver as well. Does it take a lot of deliberate self-reflection, self-work, thinking, working stuff out? Yeah, absolutely it does. It requires all of that, but I firmly believe that it is worth it. It is worth the time it takes to do the figuring out, to supporting yourself through it, to figuring out how you can be the best mother and caregiver you can be and honor your own ambitions too. For some women, that may look like doing it at different times. For some women, dependent on their own level of support, their own histories, all the things that we've touched on today, they may be able to integrate both. Wonderful. But you owe it to yourself as a mother and a human that deserves to explore that.
Oh my God, beautiful. Absolutely love that. If you have children in daycare and you are working, or they're in mainstream school and you're working, you're not damaging your children. Like, how did we get to this in society? Because I feel like that's often the message that I see, and it's just yuck. Like, I feel like so many women are doomed with whatever path they go. And I think that's true with some of the narratives we see online, and why it's so important to find people who use evidence-based practices and work like self-love security and attachment-based parenting.
Yeah.
Because it's from that lens, not from, there's only one way to do it and you must stay at home or you must not do this. Yeah, I think that's just horrible.
Yeah, I agree.
Thank you so much, Jack. I have so appreciated this conversation, and I know it's going to help so many beautiful mamas listening to this.
Pleasure. I loved being here. So thanks for having me on.
My pleasure.